since 9/11. What's your perspective on the whole situation now, being so far removed?
To be honest with you, it's still fresh in my memory. You know, it's something, like you said, it's a day we'll never forget. It's a life changer. It makes you leery. No, I don't want to say scared, but it makes
unsafe a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah,
makes you second guess a lot of things. Like, I still think about how we could have tried to prevent it.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Because people walking out of there, we've all seen the pictures. People come walking out of New York City covered in dust. You couldn't tell whether they were black, white, Asian.
They were American.
Puerto Rican. You couldn't tell any of them. Everybody was an American. For once in their life, everybody was an American.
Yeah.
And God, what a beautiful place that was. Out of suffering comes some beauty.
Brings us closer together.
Correct.
You know, and like I said, that was, I mean, you know, being a cop back then, everybody loved cops back then. People were stopping and thanking you for what we do.
See, I never knew anything but. Okay?
Yeah.
But that way of policing after post 9/11. You have an interesting perspective on it. You were a cop for 5 years prior to 9/11. How did things change for you, the way you do business?
You know, like I said, people had more respect for you back then. So it was a little bit of an easier time. You know, you had to start dancing around things, though. Like if you pulled over someone that was Arabic or from the Middle East or something like that, you started getting like...
A little jumpy?
I had nothing to do with that.
Yeah. Well, so that's a good point, because there was a lot of businesses in this area, and a lot of businesses are Indian owned. Indian
Absolutely.
and Arab are completely different. Indians were very friendly towards American, and at that time, I want to point this out, certain Arabic people did not like us for our policies.
But like I said, there was a couple gas stations in town that were owned by Indians, and the guys wore the turbans. They caught a lot of shit.
Yeah, in my town, they put a sign up that says, "We are Indian owned."
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy. And it's very short-sighted. But again, it's judging somebody by the lowest common denominator. These hijackers, they're pieces of shit. Okay, bottom line is they're pieces of shit.
And what do they get out of it? 37 virgins? Isn't that what they get when they commit suicide or something like that?
So that's an interesting point, Mike. Let's say Muhammad Atma. We have him in on the Suffering Podcast. He has his reasons. We talked about this on Instagram Live. You have some, it was who would you, three people you have dinner with. Well, one of my answers was a really bad megalomaniac throughout history. He was long since dead, rightfully so. He had his justifications, his reasons. Having Muhammad Atma sit across from us, or one of the other people in there, what do you think is going through their minds?
Exactly. I mean, what are you really going to get out of this? You're going to die. You're a suicide bomber.
Yeah.
What's in it for you? I really don't get it.
I'm very tied into my faith, and I believe in my faith. But my faith, there's a moral code, and there's a moral code to Islam. Let me make that very clear. This is not terrorists. This is not Islamic terrorists. These are just terrorists, because Islam is I know Islam pretty well. Islam is a very peaceful religion that mentions Moses, mentions Abraham, mentions Jesus. It's a different prophet. All right. Islam, the Quran, does not teach suicide bombing.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would just look at him and go, do you have any idea the repercussions and the families that you destroyed, you son of a bitch?
Just, what were you thinking? What did you think this was going to get for you? It's not going to make your country any better. It's actually going to destroy your country, because you mess with the U.S., we're going to come after you. So what did you really think was going to come of this? I don't understand it.
Well, do you think it was funded by certain governments?
It's possible. I mean, there's conspiracy theories out about that.
There's fair amount of proof. I think in one of Saddam's palaces, there was a picture of the World Trade Center on fire, a mural. and then you had Osama bin Laden, who was the architect, who was the mastermind behind all of that stuff.
Who has about 50 kids.
Yeah, exactly, and stash of porn, and he was a really good guy. He was really tight. He was doing it all for Allah.
But see, that's what you gotta think about. He's got a whole brood of kids. They were raised by him,
Educated in America.
but they're born into that terrorism mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say there's going to be another Osama bin Laden.
There's always going to be. You cut the head off a snake, another one's coming up.
Whether you got ISIS or any of those people. My department sent me to, believe it or not, Anniston, Alabama. Not Jennifer Aniston. It was a weapons of mass destruction class. And they told us terrorists are hard workers, good actors, and they're very patient. He said, who's to say they're not getting a job in every stadium, every football stadium in the country right now? They're good workers. They'll work their way up the chain. They'll start getting more clearance. And they'll say, okay, on such and such date, we're going to release like anthrax in a stadium.
We're all dead.
It's 16 stadiums on a Sunday? 32 teams, right? 16 stadiums. They don't care if they die. They'll release anthrax. They'll kill 70 to 80,000 people in a pop. Guy said, we can't stop that, but we have to try to prevent it.
I'll bet you they got eyes on every one of those kids.
Oh, without doubt.
Yeah. Now, the U.S.'s reaction, obviously, we went to war, 20-year war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you think, looking at and playing Monday morning quarterback on this, do you think our reaction was right? Do you think we went the right direction, or were we just sort of trying to figure out what was going on?
I think we took a little time to figure it out. We lost a lot of soldiers over there. I always said, and I was shooting from the cuff, I was like, go over there and tell them you have like a week to get out of here. If you don't get out, it'll be another A-bomb, blow up the whole place.
Well, I think
you're gonna try to mess with us.
We'll turn you into sand, into glass.
Exactly, and then we'll take it over.
Yeah.
Be West America, East America, whatever you want to call it.
Taking out Saddam Hussein, in my opinion, totally my opinion, was the biggest mistake that America ever made, because they have a different mindset over there. He ruled by fear, but you have to rule by fear over there. And when he left, the power vacuum created ISIS,
Exactly,
and ISIL, Al-Qaeda, to Taliban, and all those things are 10 times worse. It's always better to deal with the devil you know.
If you have one ruler, they're going to listen to him. Once he gets killed, they have 30 different people that are
Radicalized.
Yeah, radicalized, and they're going to start their own factions of terrorism.
So it's a scary proposition that, it's not if it's going to happen again, it's when.
It's when, exactly.
It's when.
And like I said, that's what they told us down in Alabama. We can't stop it. We have to try to prevent it. It's a scary thing if you think about it.
So 22 years is gone since 9/11. What's your perspective on the whole situation now, being so far removed?
To be honest with you, it's still fresh in my memory. It's something, like you said, it's a day we'll never forget. It's a life changer. It makes you leery. No, I don't want to say scared, but it makes
unsafe a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah,
makes you second guess a lot of things. Like, I still think about how we could have tried to prevent it. Like I said,
do you think we really could have, though?
No.
I don't think we could have either.
But the plane crashing into the Pentagon.
Yeah.
That's the epicenter of the United States.
It was trying to go to 93 was trying to hit the White House.
And you can't stop that plane? I always thought there was like guns around the thing where if a plane was coming,
50 cal guns like in World War II.
They'd blow up the plane before it hit the building. I mean, that to me, like I said, was scary. If they could hit the Pentagon, they could hit anything they want.
I think now we're a little bit better prepared. But 22 years, see, I'm like you. It's something I'm never, ever, ever going to forget. I remember what it feels like that day. I remember what I felt like going back to my department, going into this job where it's totally changed. I remember the anxiety. I remember not being able to sleep that night. I remember just being quiet. Like, do you remember how quiet the atmosphere got?
Yeah. Well, you had no planes, right? They wouldn't let planes get off the ground at all.
Nobody went to work.
Nobody went to work. Everybody stayed home. They were all huddled in their houses. And I remember about a week later or whatever it was, when I saw the first plane flying, because North Arlington, Lyndhurst area is in the landing pattern or the takeoff pattern for Newark Airport and Teterboro Airport. See that first plane up in the sky?
You imagine being the first passenger to board a plane when the flight started going again?
As soon as it hits the ground, it's like, oh, thank God.
Oh, my God. Your asshole could probably cut a diamond.
Like I said, just seeing that first plane in the air, it was just like, I stared at it as it just flew overhead.
Yeah.
Thinking about
something you hadn't seen in a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what a weapon the plane could be is what I really thought about. The guy that lived across the street from me was a state trooper. And he calls me up a week after the planes hit the World Trade Center. He said a bunch of us are going down to State Police Newark Bay Station. He said, we're jumping on a boat and we're going over to the World Trade Center for the cleanup. He goes, do you want to go? I was off that night. I'm like, yeah, sure, let's go. So we were actually on what they called the bucket brigade. People were cleaning everything out, and they had a line of people, and they were picking up buckets, putting debris in buckets and passing them down the line. And they'd say, like, debris. Then they'd say, like, plane parts. And a couple times they said body parts. Mm. So now the buckets come down there. They're going like, debris. When they said body parts, you want to look in that bucket, And you just look into it and you see like a hand like this. And that was terrible.
Seeing a license, any type of personal
paperwork from all the different companies strewn all across the ground. I mean, you look down at the paperwork and you see people's names on it.
Signatures. Anything personal that passed through your hands had to affect you in a certain way. And what was it, like 15, 16 years after 9/11, after 2001, they still found some stuff. It was like in a storm sewer or something like that. And I have a feeling that that's not over. Some people were absolutely incinerated. There's nothing left but dust. But there's probably still some stuff laying around that area.
Yeah, I mean, that's why people have such a problem with that Staten Island where Clinton McGregor went. Mm-hmm. They have a problem with that because they're getting rid of all the stuff. And they're like, there could be body parts in there. Could be remains in there.
Like just a graveyard.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what it is. Yeah. Whether they're dust now or whatever, because when the World Trade Center went down, it pancaked and fell straight down. All those floors fell on top of people. Mm-hmm. So those people are just
forever encased. So
that's just sad.
Eventually, as we talked about earlier, an event like this is going to happen again. Somebody like you, and I'm not even going to put myself in that situation. You're going to need to advise the younger people who weren't around, who weren't on the job. You got to remember, 22 years ago, if you just got on, you're getting ready to retire, most of them.
Like I said, my son was 3 months old. He doesn't realize the severity of that.
What do you think the advice you give people of the new officers if something like this ever does happen again?
Well, you know what? I mean, we were being asked so many questions, and we were working so much. We were tired, and you tend to get a little grumpy when you're tired.
A little short.
But people wanted answers. They wanted to know what was going on. And the first thing you do is talk to a cop to get the answers. Cops know everything.
Of course. Little do they know, we knew very little.
Very little. Yeah, we probably knew less than them because we were working and they were watching the news. My whole thing was just be compassionate, because they may have someone in there. I had to make notifications. We had 3 people from Lyndhurst who were in the World Trade Center. I went to one of the houses. And I knew the guy's wife. Didn't know her all that well, but I knew who she was. Because what happened is to get, I guess you could say, a head count, you had to file a missing persons report. And all that data went, I guess, into New York or whatever. And that's how they calculated how many people were lost. So I go to this guy's house, and it was right after 9/11. His wife comes to the door, and it was around noon or so. She comes to the door. She's still like in a robe. She goes, "Are you here to give me bad news?" What do you say to that? They just had a son that was born right around my son's birthday. So the kid was 3 months old. His father was lost in the World Trade Center. I had to tell her that she had to file a missing persons report. And
you would ask me a question earlier, and I know this is a little out of sorts. You asked me what the most disturbing picture I saw, and it just dawned on me. At Newark Airport, in the parking deck, there were cars that went unclaimed for weeks, and they were passengers on one of the planes. And I've seen a picture of that, and you can look it up online. It might be one of the most disturbing, because those people showed up that day to catch an early flight, to go wherever they're going, to get away. Maybe they were going on vacation. Maybe they were going for work. Their cars, they parked their cars, they got out, maybe a little excitement, maybe a little anxiety, because, if they're like me, I don't like to fly. But that was it. That was the last time they will lock their car.
Last time they shut that door.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just weird,
Oh, Mike,
You never know.
we're coming to the end of this thing, and there's suffering in here. But there's beauty in it. There is beauty in it. It's hard to see sometimes. What do you think the suffering of 9/11 has taught you from your own personal experience?
I'm going to say after something like that, we have to be resilient as a country. We have to stick together. I don't care, black, white, Asian, Hispanic. We're fucking Americans. We're Americans. Let's stick together.
We bleed red.
Everybody bleeds red.
Yeah.
So,
except them damn Klingons, they bleed green.
And those Puerto Ricans. All right. What do you think that suffering taught you?
I'm going to go back to what I learned from my uncle when I was lost and I was just looking for a little bit of direction from somebody who's been there, somebody who's seen something similar. The only person I could speak to who has seen something similar, another attack on U.S. soil. You can't be afraid. If you're afraid,
they win.
The terrorists did their job.
Exactly.
That's going to do it for this episode, Mike.
Thank God.
It was a little tough. It was a little tough.
But, we had to do it.
Yes,
we had to do it. I mean, it's just, like you said, pay homage to the victims and their families.
And get a little bit of our own little personal grief out as well.
Absolutely.
So that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, the suffering of 9/11 with Mike and Kevin. And let's think about all the stuff that we've learned.
It's been a lot.
Front row seats aren't always the best. War is just chaos. Policing is different between rescue and recovery. Terrorism only wins when we're afraid. But most importantly, never, ever, ever forget. That's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast. Don't forget to follow us on all social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, OnlyFans. Go to popple.com for a digital business card. Put in the code TSP20 for a 20% discount. And join our subscription channel on YouTube. And once these episodes here, like the one we're recording, are uploaded, you will have access to all of them earlier than everybody else. Don't forget to follow Mike at Mike_Failace. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. And, of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. We're going to see you on the next episode.